Hello there, and welcome back to our Orlando time-lapse series. In today's episode, we will start to construct the big Esplanade area in front of the railroad station. The word Esplanade is of course a very broad and general term where I define it as every space there is in front of the park that leads up to the park. May it be a road, a path, a plaza, pretty much everything there is that is connected to the park entrance and serves the people and guests to access the park itself, I define as Esplanade. When you are roaming through those Esplanade areas, you get this appetizer effect where you get excited and hyped about the coming things that you are going to see in the park itself. Those areas are of course very spacey, layouted, but in between you always have those intersections and small connections, I would call them, where the flow of the crowd gets interrupted and divided in between those options. There we are again on this topic of decision points, where people have to make a decision on where they want to go, and this helps tremendously in managing those crowds through the park and also in front of the park. And I think humans are very social, but at some point there are just too many people, and where we try to avoid this density. It's of course not an escape, but maybe a decision to make that you want to go into a different zone where you don't have so many people around you and where you can't control your own little private space with your friends and family maybe. And that's why I think those sideways and little shortcuts in between are so vital to make this whole system, this whole natural flow system work in the end. But to end this topic, I wanted to emphasize how important this area actually is. I just feel that it gets neglected a little bit just because it's so obvious that it's there, and maybe the fact that it is not seen as an attraction by itself, but it steps into the background to make everything else in the park work in the end. And I just find this so very charming, this sneaky approach again of it's so obvious that you can't miss it, but actually nobody cares about you because you just work. So it's the same principle like in architecture, where mostly it just works and you don't even question it. So as you see in the last minutes, we layouted now the main entrance or those buildings around the main entrance. I believe on the left side of the entrance there is a newsstand inside the building, and in the right building you have locker rooms and rental for your wheelchair. So when I layouted this area or this building, I noticed that the roof is quite interesting here, and it works because it's symmetrical. You have this overhanging of the roof in front of the main entrance, where people actually go through this area and where they show their ticket and where they enter the park. And because both buildings are symmetrical, it performs this loop, and this defines the entrance plaza in front of the railroad station. When I did Anaheim, I noticed that the entrance buildings, it's the same concept there. They are of course a little bit more angled, and we have there 4 buildings by themselves, but in general they perform also this motion, which then defines the later layout, how this entrance plaza looks in front of the railroad station. I always try on thinking, what story do they want to tell us with their architecture and their layout? Why did they design it in that way? I'm sure that most things you see in the park are very specific and deliberate. So when I imagine myself in a story-driven way visiting the park my first time, it makes perfect sense then how it's layouted. First you stroll around on those big esplanades and you get slowly and slowly much more excited about what's to come, then you go through the main entrance and see already this Victorian-styled railroad station. And it makes it even more exciting now. And then you see yourself in this little loop plaza in front of the railroad station. And from there, you have two choices. Go to the left tunnel or the right tunnel. You go through the left tunnel. Then you go to the railroad station. Then you may take a train to Frontierland. Then you visit Big Thunder Mountain. And later on, you maybe go to Haunted Mansion. I hope you kind of get this principle I try to explain here. It's all about like this story-driven design. Not only the attractions and rides of the park itself are driven by this story they want to tell you, but the sheer park itself is driven by that, and the layout and the architecture and the scenery with the music, pretty much everything is perfectly designed to make it a completely different experience what you are used in the normal world. And that's just so very fascinating, because in architecture, mostly you are limited within a certain building. Outside of this building, everything follows different norms and standards. But this park in its whole, and especially in Orlando, I mean, it's not only the park, it's this complete universe you have there. It's this creation of a completely different world in a certain scale. This mixture of story, of architecture, of scenery, of music, of entertainment, combined with the element of being interactive and to be experienced within rides and attractions. This complete package is so special and, at least in my opinion, performed in that high quality only in Disneyland. May it be in Anaheim or Orlando, but both of those places are so very magical. But maybe let's get back to the build now. So as you can see, I'm creating this little planting bed, and I found this piece here, this marmor base plate, is quite fitting for that. In reality, it's made out of stone or maybe even concrete that's casted, but it has this beveled effect. It's not completely a sharp corner, it's a round corner. And so I tried to use this little beveled edges on those marmor base plates for using that. The question comes now also, what foliage do we use? And I found those little flowers that are quite fitting for that, I think. I just gave them a generic white, blue and a little orange-red tone, because those colors are the color palette for the main street. And those colors are also on the American flag. And in reality, you have just a little shrubbery there. And I thought that on this important location, basically directly in front of the station and on the main entrance of the whole kingdom, we need something a little bit more special there. And I think you can do this with pretty much any foliage in the park. You could always say that the gardener made it a little bit different, and so it's not so static like in architecture. On those spots, I think we can improvise a lot. I mean, you saw it earlier in the episodes where I had to choose a certain tree for the railroad station, and I used this eucalyptus tree. In reality, you don't have this eucalyptus tree, of course. It's probably a maple tree or something. But at least for foliage, I think it's more important to go for a visual quality and aesthetic than to go for now the most accurate rendition of foliage there is. I mean, at the end, we have to work with the pieces that are provided by the game, and this approach makes sense then, I think. So for the fences, I used now also the same metal elements there as for the fence that we used on the railroad station. I mean, this is a constant question how we are doing fences in the game and also in the whole park, because you have, of course, different zones, different areas there, and depending on how the fence looks like, we can, of course, make use of those metal elements. But something that concerns me a little bit is, again, the increasing piece count. In a way, it's a little bit unavoidable, I mean, we have to place something there, you know? And if I now place down a vanilla fence, it would just look like absolute crap, I think. It's just this dilemma. Should I go for a very accurate and realistic build? Then I would have to use high piece counts. Or do I stay relatively performant and use very little pieces, but it looks like absolute crap in the end? So it's really a decision to make here. But speaking performance, I am actually surprised as of the game right now that at least for my PC, for my hardware setup, it runs still very smoothly and performant. And also it's loaded within 10 to 20 seconds. So it's really great. I'm right now at the stage of making this central hub, and I'm roughly around 90k pieces. And still for that, I think it's a great performance. When I think of the prequel, at this piece count already, we had so many problems, I think, and we would not have 80 to 90 FPS in the game. We had only 30 or 40 FPS, I would think. But of course, if we already have 90k and we are not even finished really with the entrance, I mean, you can kind of do the math here, how this will multiply over the coming continuation of this whole project. But I will tell you, if we encounter any very heavy performance issues in this game, we will just rely on our little old tactic like in the prequel, where I would create one area in the park, and this area I would create in a separate save game, so that you have, of course, for every area in the park a different save game, and one save game where you then merge everything into one park. I mean, at the end, the goal might be that you have everything in one park and you can play it, and hopefully with enough FPS, you can really experience it. But really, it doesn't matter so much to me, just because I'm so used to the poor performance of the prequel. We just keep on going, and that's the idea here. Not really care about that, because it would otherwise impact our building method. And at this point, I would question everything then, if it's worth to recreate it that accurately. So for those flagpoles on top of the railroad station, I used those curtain elements from the mythology pack, and they were quite good for that, because normally a flag is not a static element. Like I had to use it like in Anaheim, where it was just like this little billboard on top of it. But here the flag is actually resting and it's pointing downwards. So while we continue on recreating this entrance, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the current update of Planet Coaster, and also the sudden release of this DLC. So I have mixed feelings about this update. So first of all, of course, it's great that they finally make a bigger update where they add now class pieces. I mean, that's the big thing for me at least. Then they added coaster support elements, and they are just great because you can scale them down to even 10%. So they are greatly flexible. And then they added fireworks, and I already checked those out and they just look amazing. And I really like how they implemented it, because you have those thumbnails on them and they tell you already there what the effect or the firework is. So it's not like in the prequel where you just had like those generic names and then suddenly a firework works differently. Now you can actually plan in beforehand, okay, what effect do I need to make my sequence work in the end? So great feature there. And there are also some minor fixes, I think, and they also improve those animations on those water slides. And I mean, they called it physics, but it's not really physics, I think. It's just slightly better animations. I know they want to implement physics, but I just think that it is very technically difficult to achieve, and to actually make it so that people could actually, when they ride into a curve or something like that, that they could actually fly out of it. And it's really a simulated ride in the end, and not like a ride that looks like it's simulated. And this would make it, of course, much more interesting in designing those water rides, because you have to take into account that people could actually fly out of it. And it's this phase of figuring out this perfect sweet spot of enough ride intensity and not flying out of the ride itself. But I have to say that, if they would just release this update as it is, I would have nothing bad against it, okay? It's really great. But who had this terrible idea of releasing a DLC on the same day? Seriously, that's just so outrageous, bad idea to make. You had this chance here to restore your authenticity and your trust to the people, because they had, of course, complaints about the game, and they wanted that those things get fixed. And now you fix them, but on the same day you push out this little DLC, and it's really a terrible idea, I think, because it grabs the whole attention of the people, you know. The free update should be here in the focus point, and it should be the highlight. But this little DLC is grabbing all the attention now. It's just a bad marketing strategy, I think. If you have to make money, release it in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks from today, but first fix the game and then add the features, okay? We could speak also about if it's really worth $10 for those 5 rides. I don't think so. But even here, it's not about the price or anything like that. It's just about this principle to fix the game first and recognizing the reality and what state the game actually is right now and how the public is interacting with it. The player base is constantly shrinking, and releasing a DLC in this situation, I think, is just the worst case. It just smells so scummy. And it's also a slap in the face of those people who pre-ordered the deluxe edition or anything, because the game is currently on discount. We are a little over 1 month of the release of the game itself. But explaining to somebody that you paid 2 months before I paid full price, and now to see this game so discounted, it's also not a good strategy, okay? Combining that with this DLC policy so quickly after this unfinished and unpolished game, it's really not a great idea, I think. I will buy anything there is, regardless of the price. I said it already, but I'm of course not the average player, okay? The average player will not buy those DLCs. And you can of course say now, okay, you don't need those rights, you don't have to buy that DLC. But still, when there is some DLC, it always implies that you are missing something in the game. When you open the game, they advertise that DLC very greatly. And so I just would like, if this DLC, if it has a decent amount of content, then it would be absolutely no problem. But first of all, fix the game and then make those DLCs. And not only a ride pack, make a content pack. Then people will buy that, because it's really something that is worth to have in the game, and that you can sense this effort into it. That was what worked in Planet Coaster 1 and also in Planet Zoo, that you had content packs that improved the game with scenery and with different rides and also different features there. And I think at this point you don't even need those free updates then anymore. Just believe in those DLCs, but make them good enough, you know? Make them broad enough that you have enough content that is really worth to have. Just focus on them. And that they are a true expansion to the game itself, and not just like a little ride pack for $10 that seems so scummy 1 month after the release, on the exact same day of the first update. And the fact that they did not announce that in any way in before, it tells you already a lot about this whole thing. But yeah, I feel it's just very sad, I think, and unnecessary, you know. If you are so desperate in making money, there are other ways to do that. This is absolutely not the right decision here to make, and I hope they will in the future fix those things and work on real content that we need in the game. At first it may look like that it looks a great way to make money, to release some ride packs there, but I think it's the exact opposite of that. It's how not to make money. because it's so bad that nobody will buy it. Then again, the player base will shrink and shrink and shrink. And in some months from now, when you have the great content that we all want, then there will be nobody there else. And maybe they come back. But why do we have to experience this situation in beforehand? Why can't we have this game in its full greatness already? And instead have to witness this path of suffering and the desperation of making money. So at the end, again, it's a little bit sad, and I hope they will go into a very different direction in the future. But at least for now, I can state that this will make no impact whatsoever on the continuation of our project here. But enough ranting for today. Let's keep on going with the build. So as you see, I'm creating those entrance signs that are very interesting in their appearance, I think. You have on the top this metal cage that holds basically the sign. On the outside of the park it says, of course, guest entrance, and on the inside, when you are in the park, it says exit, and it directs you to the left side. And the sign itself, the font of it, is actually lit with a background, a light stripe basically. And later on, I found actually a light in the game that functions exactly like that, and it fits perfectly within that sign. So right here I lay out those catwalks or those platforms that are on top of those roofs that are usually part of the backlot. And it's of course necessary for those people that work on those roofs to know where to step, that they don't just step into a trap or something and then fall off the roof or something like that. At least I think it's a little bit a guidance on where to step on those roofs. And the question is here, of course, how to design those roofs, because normally you don't see any image of that. You only have the aerial image to work with. And then, of course, you have to think what could be on those roofs, and what looks like it, that it could be there. And so I always think about electrical cables and things and tubes and infrastructure that is just there to get this place working. The same as with those ventilation units. I mean, you have to be a little bit cautious about those ventilation units, because when you do too much of them, it looks very comical, I think, and it looks artificial. So I try to use them at a bare minimum. And also I found those decals here work pretty nicely to get this weathered effect, because I mean those roofs are in action all the time, 24 hours in the day. And of course with rain, with snow, with pretty much anything that happens to something that is exposed to the exterior. So right now I'm adjusting the lighting of those bulb lights, because I found them very artificially lit and just too bright overall. And now I recolor them to a more brownish color. And the problem, as you see, that the light itself, when I make it more brown, the light gets actually brown on the outside of it. So it would be great here to have two different color channels, one for the light itself and for the lighting, so that you can set that independently from each other. And here we are again, where I decide to present a new idea or feature when you could actually have an intensity slider here. How intense this lighting is, I mean, this would be just the greatest thing. I mean, you can kinda simulate it with a different color, where you just decrease the saturation or the brightness of it. And this would just give you a little bit more flexibility. And even to the point where you could animate that you have a constant increase or decrease of a light intensity. So as I'm trying to lit up this railroad station, I found maybe that it would be a great addition also if you could make certain lights invisible, because most of those lights, they are visible, and of course I have to hide them somewhere. And I mean, on the railroad station it makes sense to present them, adds to the realism effect. But at certain points where I would like to light something up from above, it kind of gets the problem where you don't have any roof there that you could place your light. And it gets a kind of problem, like for this grass hill in front of the railroad station, where I at least currently don't see any way how to light that place properly up. I mean, in general, I don't want to get back into this rent mode, but I think it's so necessary to have more light types there that are more generic and simplified, you know, just like art pieces but illuminated. It would make so much sense since this game has this perfect lighting and it's so focused on those dark rides, to have much more creative freedom there. But well, we will see if they introduce something like this in the future. I'm certain with upcoming content packs that they will include, of course, lights there. It's just a question how far they are themed. But yeah, so far we have our main entrance. Now also on the other side, I just mirrored the whole thing over, and we are now in the process of layouting this little pier in front of the park. And for that it was very important to exactly measure the distance from roughly the main entrance to the edge of this pier, and where you basically go then over the water. So the thing here was that I'm pretty much limited to the height elevation of the sea level, because you can place the sea basically on every meter there is, and so I have to stay within that height elevation, and where we basically have our ground elevation, and then -1 is our water level. And there you have, of course, exactly 1 meter to the surface of the water. And for this pier wall, I used just those plastered wall sets. And I begin now to lay out those rough shapes that we have and to measure that out. And for now I will do a little musical intermission, and after it we will construct the pavilion on top of the pier. So as we now have our layouted and built pier, which was, by the way, pretty easy to construct with the path system, I now decided to start with this pavilion. And basically this pavilion is just there to when you enter or exit the ferry boat. So when it rains, of course, you don't want to get wet. Therefore, you have this pavilion where you basically wait for your ferry boat. And the thing was here again to think, we have the guest camera, therefore people will walk under this pavilion and they will see, of course, the structure of it. And therefore I decided now to construct this thing like it would be constructed in reality. And at first it looked pretty easy. After a while it was quite time consuming, or at least I thought it was, because you have to, when you make it to the measurements like it is in reality, you have to count those distances between those poles, and you have to find the perfect amount, how many fit in a certain distance to each other. And this process took a while, but after I figured it out, it was just a process of doing it and placing all those railings and profiles. While I was constructing, I always thought, okay, if I stick now to this detail level all over in the park, we will probably end with millions of pieces in the end. And at the end of the pavilion, I thought I placed down 10,000 pieces. But actually, it just consists out of 3,000 pieces complete, with the roofing that comes later on. So in the end, I think it's a decent balance here between piece count and performance. And if you think about it, it's almost like we have no other choice, because what would be the alternative here? And when I realized that, I do not feel myself anymore so worried about using so many pieces here. We use those pieces to achieve this high level of detail and to make it in the end look so realistic. So we don't just do it for fun or anything, we do it for a purpose here. And therefore I don't feel so bad anymore about that. Something that you saw maybe earlier, that I placed those two boats there and I immediately removed them again. At this point already I knew, okay, when I go now to this detail level, I can't just stick with this vanilla boat, you know. I mean, it just looks not in the right dimension here. And therefore I decided, when I do those boats, I built those boats, of course, also out of individual pieces. But still, I'm a little bit hesitant here, because I don't fully know how they will edit or rework this feature of when you attach scenery on rides. Because I would do this, of course, here, so that it looks later on like this boat actually performs a little tour around the sea. One scenario I thought of was, if I wanted to change the ride itself, how could I save now the scenery I built? Because I looked into it and it seems at least that I can't save the scenery I built there as a blueprint. And so if I now want a different ride that maybe has a different speed or something like that, I can't copy over the stuff, you know. And therefore I have to be pretty sure that I stick to that ride and to build now this boat within that ride. So it's again the thing of not being dependent on a game feature here, or the lack thereof. But at some point I'm sure that I'm willingly to build this boat, and maybe in the future, if they make any changes to the actual park size, this will of course be influenced then where the boat will go. I mean, just imagine how cool that would be, how this would actually work with the guest camera, because you would kind of have to simulate how you drive now on this boat. But wait, I mean, we use scenery on the ride, and therefore we have a ride that we can actually use for our camera. Yeah, that's actually a great idea that comes just to my mind. So as we continue to work on this pavilion structure, I wanted to give you a little insight on what I planned for this December, because it's of course the end of the year, and I thought to finish this year with a special video with a little Christmas touch to it. So after this video there will be another one, and after that there will be a special episode. So the year 2025 that's coming will be of course a very important one. I mean, it will not only mean that we continue on this project in Orlando, but it will also cover of course the continuation on Anaheim. And you know, I have so many rides still there that you didn't see, and I want to polish them up and make them presentable and make videos about that. So there will be a lot of content for you guys, I hope. So the best thing I can dream of is that I see myself in 1 year from now and see the progress over this whole year and how the park grows and attracts more people, and to see this process of progress. I just would love that. So when I would have to predict how far we make it till next year in the park, I would think that we at least make Main Street of course, but including the castle, the Esplanade, and as well Frontierland or Tomorrowland. It just depends if it's including the rides. When I remember correctly, I built Main Street in Anaheim within 6 or 7 months, and with the full backlot I had 1 year. But within that year there were many pauses in between, and I was not really focused on that. But now I can see myself including the whole experience that I had in Anaheim. I can see myself doing those things in half a time or even less. So as you see, we construct now the roof of the pavilion, or the material it's used for that. And in reality you have of course there like this fabric that's a little bit translucent, and there is just no way to recreate that in any other way than to use art pieces, I think, at least for now. And actually when I look under this roof, I think it gives quite a nice balance of shadow tones there. It's probably due to the ambient occlusion of those metal elements that are so close to those art pieces. So again, the stage where I present a new feature, just make art pieces, but in different textures. I say that so often, okay? I mean, it's so simple, right? Just take those art pieces and just import it with a different texture, with a different roughness or a different translucency, that you can actually make them like a glass sheet. And then you could of course simulate this situation where you have a pavilion, and I mean a pavilion makes sense of course within a resort theming and maybe also in a water park, but this would give you so much creative freedom. Oh gosh, I really feel I repeat myself over and over in this video, but I just can't repeat it enough, that I still have hope in this game and also in the developer. But the recent events and actions, they just feel so unnatural that I even question, is it that Frontier that I used to know in the prequels? Maybe it's just the fact that they have to make money, but something feels not right here, you know? Something feels kinda fishy. It's this strange mix of ambivalence where they suddenly have very good things and very bad things, and where you almost question, how can this be the same developer? How can one developer make such good moves and in the second of it make the worst mistakes there? I don't want to get into the specifics and details of that. I just want to clarify that there is something, and to let you guys know that there is something clearly wrong here. But I still have hope that they eventually find out what is so wrong here and fix it, and just keep on going to make this game bigger and bigger and bigger and better, and just make it a fun experience. Not only for the casual player, but also for the player who likes to build in this game. Because the building system of this game is still so unique to any other game that I know. This makes the game stick out of the market. And therefore I think if you focus on that specific uniqueness about the game, you can only win at the end. If you develop each feature that you have in the game after this principle, improving the building experience in the end, then you can only win. But if you just release right packs and think that's okay, people will buy it anyways, I don't think that will work in the end. And as you see, people on social media let you know, of course. But there is maybe even something much more bigger. There are on YouTube, for example, so many content creators out there who build so extraordinary and amazing creative things in the game. And they do it because they are interested into this game and they want to show it to people. And those people who watch it are of course then also interested into the game. So it's this concept of a free advertisement that you get. And therefore it just makes sense for me to push this area and to make this game on the building side so pleasantly and so advanced in their building techniques that you can build so many amazing stuff in this game. Because I still think that most people who buy the game in the end, they most certainly came across one or two YouTubers and they saw amazing builds there and they were interested into this game then. And I still think without the representation of those content creators making videos about the game, also now during the phase before the launch of the game, I truly believe that almost nobody would know about the game. And to make now a full circle, I believe that this game would not exist without the community. And therefore it's so important to respect the community in its whole and to not slap them in the face with this poor DLC idea where you don't even get something really worth it. Give the people something they want, something that it's worth to have, where they also don't feel betrayed or robbed. Something that makes sense from a development team, from their financial status, but also something that makes sense from the customer's point of view and where both of those parties will meet. So at the end, there is really nothing I can tell you anymore now, other than just to hope and that they hopefully find the right way out of this and they finally develop this game in a proper fashion and where they also take their community seriously. Please note that this subject is of course very subjective and I'm certain that there are many people that have a different opinion than me and a different opinion than you. It's very natural and therefore I would like to know your opinion, how you feel about this whole situation. Do you believe that Frontier has made the right decision or the wrong decisions? How was your experience? Maybe it was completely different than mine. And just your overall thoughts that you have about the future of this game. At the end, we are all bound to the same developer and the game that we know and maybe also love. There is some kind of unity that all of us share and that keeps us together being a player of this game. With those words, we will continue our journey and I want to conclude today's episode. As you will see in a second, we built now this pavilion structure and I think it looks pretty gorgeous. The structure under it might be a little bit overkill, but I think it fits perfectly within this realism look. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, subscribe, like or comment, join our Discord server, watch my videos about Anaheim or Orlando, and thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.